We've got an interesting article here. It's posted at joeplummer.com. If you'd like to read it yourself, we've included the link below. The article covers what the author predicts will be an inevitable shift away from indiscriminate vaccinate-everyone policies toward a future based on focused protection.
That's a huge premise.
It is. And it really forces us to look at this deep tension in public health. So for our deep dive today, we're going to analyze the ethical and economic forces that separate these two philosophies. One treats the whole population as a single body, and the other, well, it treats us as individuals.
Exactly. And that's the starting line for anyone trying to understand this. You have the vaccinate-everyone idea, which is totally indiscriminate and says, look, we have to protect the population, so every single person has to comply, regardless of their own personal risk.
Okay. And the other side?
That's focus protection. It's specific. It actually looks at the population as a collection of individuals, analyzes their unique risk factors, and it only recommends an intervention when the benefit for that specific person clearly outweighs the risk. The two policies couldn't be more different.
Let's unpack the ethics first, because the author makes a strong case that focus protection is really just trying to restore some core tenets of medical ethics that get lost in that first approach.
They really do.
So first is informed consent, which has to exclude manipulation or coercion by definition. Second is the big one. First, do no harm. Unnecessary interventions always carry unnecessary risks.
Mm-hmm.
And third is using the smallest intervention necessary, which for a healthy person is often zero intervention.
Right. And that third point, the sheer scale of the intervention, that's what the author calls the core ethical crisis. I mean, think about it just in terms of numbers. It might be questionable to vaccinate, say, 2 people, just to make sure the one person who might benefit gets protected. But when that policy scales up, when you're vaccinating 100 or 1,000 or even 10,000 people unnecessarily,
just to reach that one person who needs it.
Yes. That action, the author says, is indescribably worse. It becomes medically indefensible.
It's like the analogy in the article. It's like medicating the entire country with antidepressants just to make sure the small percentage who actually need them get their dose. It violates the whole idea of individual care.
And that's where the ethics start to corrode. It's inevitable. If your public health goal requires everyone to comply, even people with almost no risk, then things like truth and transparency, they actually become liabilities.
Why liabilities? Because if you're honest about the low risk,
you'd undermine the reason for the universal mandate. Exactly. Rational, informed consent would cause your target market to shrink, massively. So to get that universal obedience, the policy actually requires irrational fear, it requires censorship, and it requires coercion. The data gets twisted, the risk gets inflated. People have to be compelled.
And that's where the inconsistency really jumps out. The way medical professionals talk about risk seems perfectly calibrated to get one outcome: more people taking the intervention.
The double standard is startling. Think about surgery. If you're having a major operation and the surgeon says there's a 1 in 1,000 risk of death or a really bad injury, they'll define that as extremely low.
Right, a 99.9% survival rate.
But then you switch over to infectious disease policy. All of a sudden, a risk that is 10 times lower, a 1 in 10,000 chance of a bad outcome, is framed as intolerably high.
So high that it justifies throwing out all the ethics we just talked about. That's jarring. I mean, how can a much lower risk be so dangerous that it justifies violating informed consent? Is there any logic where that makes sense?
Well, the author suggests the math only makes sense if you're looking at it through the lens of policy goals and profit, which we'll get to. Mm-hmm. But it gets even more absurd. The article points out that even a 1 in 100,000 risk, which is getting close to your odds of being hit by lightning, is still treated as high enough to demand universal vaccination.
Which brings us to the recent past. The enemy was defined not as a virus, but as vaccine hesitancy. The goal became 100% compliance. And once that's the goal, any facts that might undermine it, they have to be suppressed.
This is when we saw these incredible efforts to control information. They even created the term malinformation.
Malinformation. So what is that exactly?
Think about what this means. It's factually accurate information that might lead someone to hesitate.
So the truth is the problem.
The truth is the problem. The policy is basically admitting that objective reality is damaging to its goal. The article cites this endnote where just accurately reporting that you saw someone have an adverse event that could be labeled as spreading malinformation.
Wow. And nowhere was this gap between perception and reality wider than with seniors. The narrative was, apocalyptic.
But the reality wasn't. The article notes that in 2020, before any vaccines, 99.67% of all seniors worldwide survived COVID. The global death toll for seniors was about a third of 1%.
A third of 1%.
And crucially, the normal annual death rate for seniors from all causes is 15 times higher than that.
That comparison was never made clear. And the biggest deception, maybe, was failing to distinguish within that senior group.
Absolutely. The policy never communicated the enormous difference between a frail nursing home patient with multiple other illnesses whose risk could genuinely be, say, 20%, and a fit, healthy senior whose risk was way, way lower than that 0.33% average. Focused protection would have easily found that high-risk group. And besides, they point out that a lot of the data used to justify the mandates was flawed anyway. Bad testing, weird admission criteria.
And we saw this play out most clearly with healthy children. The data there is it's staggering.
It really is. The article brings up a big German study. They tracked 13.7 million healthy kids, and the finding was, well, it was conclusive. There were 0 deaths from the disease among those healthy children.
Huh.
The handful of child deaths they did find were all in kids who were already suffering from severe life-threatening diseases.
So for a healthy child, the risk was statistically 0. And yet the push for mandates in that group was enormous.
And even hospitalizations were inflated. The American Academy of Pediatrics admitted that most healthy kids were only hospitalized as a precautionary measure, not because they are actually in distress.
So the numbers looked scarier than the reality.
The policy of admission created a perception of risk that just wasn't there. A focused protection model would have seen the market need here as, well, almost non-existent.
This all seems to bring us to the money, the financial incentives. What if profit is what's really driving these universal policies? We have to understand the scale of it.
Right, and this is where the profit multiplier idea is so important. You don't have to imagine some secret conspiracy. It's more of a shared interest dynamic. You have billions of pharma dollars going to regulators, media outlets, medical journals. It just creates this overwhelming pressure to protect the system as it is.
So give us that salary analogy from the article. How much revenue is lost if you switch to focused protection? Start with seniors.
Okay. For seniors, a focused protection model would have cut the addressable market, the sales opportunity, by 2 orders of magnitude.
Which means?
It shrinks by 100 times, a 99% drop in potential sales. To put that in simple terms, it's like choosing a job that pays $40,000 a year or $20 an hour. The Vaccinate-Everyone policy offers a job paying $4 million a year. That's $2,000 an hour.
An industry would be actively choosing to walk away from 99% of its potential revenue.
Exactly. Who would do that?
And for children, the gap is even bigger.
Oh, it's astronomical. Because the risk for healthy kids was near 0, focused protection would cut the market by 5 orders of magnitude, a 100,000-fold reduction.
Okay, run the salary numbers on that one.
It's choosing the $40,000 a year job versus a job that pays $4 billion a year.
$4 billion.
Or $2 million an hour.
The author asks you to picture 10 Rose Bowls, all filled to capacity. That's 900,000 healthy kids. And you ask the question, how many of these kids will die without this intervention? And the honest answer is none. But the policy demanded intervention for all of them.
When the money is that different, it creates an institutional pressure that's almost impossible to resist. The narrative has to be maintained.
We should quickly touch on the common objections to this, just to give the full picture. First one, vaccines are safe and effective.
The author says, even if we accept that, for most healthy people, their own immune system is already a safe and effective protection against serious disease. So the medical risk, however small, is unnecessary.
Okay, second objection. We have a moral obligation to protect the vulnerable. Herd immunity.
Yeah, this is rejected on purely ethical grounds. You cannot force an intervention on your healthy neighbor to protect yourself. Consent and coercion just can't coexist. If you can't force one person, you can't force their whole family. Bodily autonomy comes first.
And what about the cost? Isn't individualized treatment for the few who need it way more expensive than one mass-produced dose?
The math actually works the other way. If only 1 in 10,000 people gets severely ill, you could give that one person a treatment that's 100 times more expensive than a single dose. And you'd still be saving 99% of the cost of vaccinating all 10,000 people unnecessarily.
The author says technology is actually making this inevitable. This treat only when needed, future is coming, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, technology is moving so much faster than the regulations. He gives an example from veterinary medicine, actually. There are monoclonal antibodies for parvo in puppies that have pushed survival rates to 100% in some studies. And the tech used to make that will seem ancient in like a decade.
So what's driving it?
It's the convergence of things like AI and quantum computing. These tools are going to revolutionize personalized therapies. Designing treatments based on your specific genetic code could go from taking years to just hours. The only thing holding it back will be bureaucracy and money.
So you have this rising awareness on the ethical side, plus this accelerating technology. It's creating a huge pressure against the old model. The author's conclusion is that the shift is not a matter of if, but when.
The crucial takeaway here is really about what our public health policies are optimizing for. Are they optimizing for the individual, honoring their unique risk and their right to consent? Or are they optimizing for institutional profit and the biggest possible market size? Focused protection is about putting the individual first.
And that leaves us with a final thought. If we can see now that one-size-fits-all policies caused this kind of ethical damage in one recent event, and we see the power of that financial incentive, then you have to ask yourself a pretty provocative question. What other accepted policies right now across all of medicine are optimizing for the multi-billion-dollar option instead of honoring your informed consent? You have to critically evaluate the narrative behind any mandatory intervention in your life and always ask, who really benefits from my compliance?